This is an interview with Mr. Robert Simpson for the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute's Oral History Project. I'm Dr. Horace Huntley. We're at Miles College. This is April 22nd, 1996. Thank you, Mr. Simpson, for taking time out of your schedule and coming to sit and talk with us. Could you just repeat your name, your place of birth, and your date of birth, please?
Yes, my name is Robert Simpson. I was born in Birmingham, Alabama, October 13th, 1945.
Okay. Were you an only child?
No, I had a brother. One brother, yes.
One brother. Was he older or younger than you?
He was older.
Okay. Were your parents from Birmingham originally?
My mother's from Brent County, Perry County, Brent, Alabama. Okay.
Oh, okay. Uh-huh. And your father was from Perry
Birmingham.
County? From Birmingham?
Yes.
Oh, okay. But you were born here in Birmingham?
Right.
Okay. Tell me about your parents' education. How far did they go in school?
Well, my mother went for the third grade. I'm not sure about my father, how far he went, so that's the gist of their education.
Mm-hmm. What kind of work did they do?
My mother was a housewife at home.
Mm-hmm. She didn't work outside?
She didn't work,
the house?
no.
Okay. But I'm sure that the two boys kept her pretty busy at home.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. What about your father? What kind of work did he do?
Well, he passed when I was real small, so I know very little about him, no more than what I was told.
Mm-hmm. What community were you raised up in?
I was raised up on the south side.
Okay. Where did you start school?
I went to Lane Elementary, that's right there on 13th Street, and from Lane I went to Ormond.
Mm-hmm.
So basically all my education was right there on the south side.
Right there, within walking distance.
Within walking distance.
Yeah. Tell me about Lane. Is there anything that stands out in your mind about your experience at Lane Elementary School?
Well, the one thing about Lane was that all of the kids, everybody there, we had nothing. We were all poor. That's the first thing you have to understand. Nobody had nothing, so we were all equal, having nothing.
Okay, so what did that mean?
Well, the one thing, we had a drive to learn. You know, we had the type of teachers who insisted on us learning because they wanted to prepare us. And so by them pushing us or motivating us more, you had to do certain things, you know, to get out of the lane. You had to be able to read, write, multiply, and divide, you know. Nowadays, I think it's a little different. So the teachers were interested in us learning. That's the first thing.
Mm-hmm. Did you live on the south side or in Titusville?
I lived on the south side.
Okay.
Right off 13th Street.
Right off 13th Street. That's right near where UAB is now?
Yes, it is UAB. I mean, Ormond is UAB at this point.
Right, yeah. Okay, so you live right in that
a couple of blocks from the schools.
Yeah. And you left Lane and went to Ormond?
Ormond, yes.
Okay.
I went, for a short time, I went to Carver. After the 8th grade, my mother moved. I went to Parker and Carver in one year. I was back at Ormond by the time I got to the 10th grade, so that was the only difference in my education, going with the Carver one semester and Ormond a semester in the 9th grade.
Carver and Parker on opposite sides of Birmingham.
Right.
Did you see any difference in, say, Carver, Parker, and Ormond?
No,
basically
except Carver was new. That's the only difference. Otherwise, Parker and Ormond, both of them were old schools at that time.
Right. Well, what do you remember about time that you spent, and you spent most of your high school years at Ormond?
At Ormond, right.
Is there anything that stands out in your mind about Ormond?
Yes, our principal, George C. Bell. He was.
Tell me about George C. Bell.
He was a disciplinarian. You know, he had his rules, and you had to follow them. He was a little man, but he had a powerful voice. And when he spoke, you definitely heard him, you know. He insisted on all of the boys weren't keeping the shirt tails in. There'd be no shirt tails out. He had a dress code, so to speak, you know, and everybody went along with what Mr. Bell said because he got that respect.
So he ran the school.
He ran the school, right.
Were there any teachers that would have any impact on you? Do you remember?
Well, Odessa Wolfart was my homeroom senior class teacher. I had to meet with her in the morning. My biggest problem was getting to school on time. So,
but you lived right
I
next
lived,
door.
But it was always that I had a problem getting to school on time. It was just like that.
Is that right? What year did you graduate from high school?
January 64.
64.
Uh-huh.
Okay. So, in 1963, then
I was in school.
You were a senior, well,
Junior.
sort of junior, going into your senior year.
Right.
And of course, in April '63 is when many of the most publicized demonstrations started to take place.
Right.
Were you at all involved in that?
Yes.
How did you get involved?
Well, these people came through the neighborhood canvassing and talking loud and had microphones. I remember James Bevel, a guy named Meatball, those just, and another guy, Tommy Wren. All these guys were coming around, people that we didn't know, and everybody was, in fact, the older people were afraid at that time for us to get involved in the things they were talking about, voting and, bucking the system. Or even, saying anything to the police at that time, because it was all white police, and it was that basic fear in our neighborhood of the police.
Were those individuals coming to your community or to your school?
They were coming through the community, talking about mass meetings that they were going to have, that particular night, and they were, and we sitting around with nothing to do. We didn't know what what is freedom or what about voting and things like that, and they were coming and talking to us, and most parents would tell their children, get in the house, you don't need to hear this, But with us being young kids, naturally interested, curious anyway, so what we started doing is just slipping off at night, going over to the churches where these meetings were going on, and people were talking to us, telling about the things that we were entitled to, which we had no idea about until they started talking to us. The younger kids were more receptive to hearing what these people had to say than the older people in the beginning. Because my mother was one of those who definitely was not, had no interest in being a part of the movement at that time.
And she was not in favor of your being.
She was not in favor of me being in, but then after she saw that somewhere that I was caught up in it, so, because she couldn't stop me. And before I knew it, she was right there with me, over time. It took a little time. Yeah.
Well, and you started going to mass meetings.
That's where we started on mass meetings, and they had the choir, and then Dr. King. I think the thing that a lot of stuff had happened in Montgomery that we were aware of about the buses and all, with Rosa Parks. We had heard about her going to jail. You hear a little bit of things, but we didn't know a lot until we were told what our rights were, or what we were entitled to, and how we were being treated. This was as I said, groundbreaking time here in Birmingham, because before the end it was all black and white. You went in one door, they went in another one. Certain places you could go, certain places you couldn't go. Like right there, first building you get to downtown was Sears Roebuck. If you went in there, you had to go and use a certain water fountain or a certain bathroom. You couldn't go to the other one. And it was just a rough time, and people, it was just rough,
So are you saying then that at this particular time that people like yourself, young people, they were basically ripe for the kinds of messages that were being presented?
We had an ear for it where our parents didn't, because most of the parents, the kids in my neighborhood, a lot of them, the parents never finished school. They might have got a third grade education, and most of them come from the country somewhere in Alabama. And they come to Birmingham, where everybody was coming, back in the day, the 40s and whatever. So it was just, and the condition was so bad, we couldn't get any worse at that time. So hey, here comes somebody along telling you about the things that you could have and should have, and you just, it was just that time, the time.
What was the relationship between your community and the Birmingham Police Department?
Terrible. We couldn't get caught out at night.
What do you mean you couldn't get caught out?
In the neighborhood, you couldn't even be on the streets.
What happens if you were on the street?
Police catch you out there and beat you up. I remember, I guess I maybe 14, 15 years old. My mom had sent me to the store one evening up to Bruno's to get our light bulbs had gone out, and they caught me coming through. They didn't catch me. I was coming through the alley, and the police drove up on me. And I don't know why they made me get in the car. I had to, they asked me where was I going. I told them I went to get a light bulb, and I don't know what it was. They took me in the alley. I'll never forget it. And they made me put my hands up on the back of the seat. And I was a little kid then, and my mama, nobody was around, nobody saw it, and they just beat me on my knuckles, you know. And every time I put my hands up, and they cracked me across the knuckle with the blackjack, I snatch them down. They tell me every time I snatch them down, I'm gonna get 2 more licks. So I had to keep them up there, you know.
This was in the car?
I was in the car.
Mm-hmm. And there were 2 policemen, and these 2 policemen, of
2
course,
white
were
police.
white police.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what did you do after they allowed you to leave?
I went home and told my mom about it. It was nothing. I don't even want to talk about that right now. It kind of bothers me.
But that was one of those instances where the relationship between the police department and the black community was sort of highlighted because of that kind of
well, we knew what they were doing to us, but there was nothing that we could do about it ourselves. And here along comes some more black people telling us about what we could or could not do or could have and couldn't have, and it was just the right time. And there's so many things that happened to us before then to make us want to get out there and do the things we did.
Did any of your friends have the same kinds of experiences with police officers?
Yeah. Everybody knew you better not get caught out after dark. You know, you better be on your porch or in your yard or somewhere. You couldn't be just out, you know, where you see the police, you knew to duck. It was just an instinct, especially after dark. You don't let the police see you.
Sounds like South Africa.
Somewhere. It was. It was about as bad because the living conditions was, you know, deplorable. The house we lived in, it had 1 bathroom, 2 sides used it. It had 2 rooms. Your folks slept in the front room and you slept in the kitchen, so that was it. Luckily, you had running water inside, but you had no gas. You know, we used coal and wood.
So all of this then sort of shaped what you were becoming by the time the movement came along. So again, that would make you ripe for this message that was being generated.
Exactly.
Now, I know that there were instances where these individuals from SCLC and other organizations would come into the schools. Do you remember
They
that?
weren't allowed to come to the schools. They were ostracized because all of the teachers at that time, they were afraid of their jobs. They had been told that if they got involved, that they would not work for the Birmingham Public Schools. So it was a fear thing that the teachers had, because I can remember during the time when the demonstration got hot, they locked the doors at Auburn and told us we could not go downtown. But there was a message that didn't get through to us because we found all kind of, they locked the gates, but we tore them down. We pulled the fence loose and they held the fence back, and everybody, about the hundreds, come out. You know, it was just no stopping us. There was a few kids stayed in school, but the majority come out of there and went downtown.
Was this as a result of someone coming and asking you to come out?
It was other students in the school telling other students, because they didn't allow these people to come. They may go around the school, so what the police was around, so they had, if they were around, they got arrested for, you know, over there canvassing us or whatever you call it, or talking to us, telling us about what was happening. Maybe some of the other schools, but I know at Auburn, Mr. Bell was told to lock the doors, and he locked the doors. But then, like I said, we found other ways of getting out.
What was the atmosphere like? What was that feeling like?
Oh, it was warm weather, and it was just a hot time, and it was like a fever that swept through Birmingham with kids, the younger people, and a lot of the older people too, got caught up in this movement. We knew what we had been facing, and we knew that what we could not do. My aunt, I can remember, she wanted to vote, and she was like in her 50s, and she couldn't vote. She'd go down every now and then to try to take that literacy test, that they call it, but they'd always come up with some old trick question or something to keep them from registering to vote. You know, very few blacks who got a chance to vote because they had all this long, drawn-out form, You got to know that, the Declaration of Independence and everything else in order to vote. Where it was a white person, that same line, all they went in there and did is sign on the dotted line, but it was all just a black and white thing. And like I said, these things have been going on, but the movement came along, as we call it then, and they were talking to us and explaining to us what we knew what it was, but with somebody had to have some kind of leadership. And I think Dr. King coming along when he did was the greatest thing that ever happened to America, because it helped to erase a lot of things that had been going on for, since slavery time.
Can you sort of share with us what a mass meeting was like?
Oh, it was, how you best explain it? It was like a fire, I guess. It started out small, You start a fire, let's span a little bit, and you get a big fire. Well, Birmingham was on fire. Once it got started, there was no turning around. As that song saying, "Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around." All of those things that we sang about, we believed. Because if not, then we would have just quit, stopped, say that's it. But we understand that what had happened to us, what had happened to our parents. We didn't want it, for us or our kids to come along later. And it was just more like a fever. And Dr. King had that type of, I look at it now, Dr. King had that type of charisma or that type of personality where you wanted to hear what he had to say, the message that he had to say. It was just something that we hadn't heard and something we needed to hear.
What actually took place at a mass meeting?
Well, it was singing. We had the mass choir, where we had the SCLC, then we had the Alabama Christian Movement for Human Rights. Reverend Shuttlesworth was here at the time. There were so many other things that were happening, like they were bombing the churches. They bombed his house over in Cottesville. They bombed the church, and they bombed a lot of other places. All these things were going, and the only way we knew to fight back was to march, because Dr. King did stress the nonviolent part. As far as, and he explained to us about Gandhi and his movement and how he, understood Gandhi and what Gandhi did for India. Then he felt that the same things could happen to us, because if we didn't have any guns to fight with, so we had to fight in a different way.
Do you remember the first demonstration that you took part in?
The biggest one I can remember is when we had the mass march, when all of us, so many thousands, went to jail when they brought the buses downtown and took them out to the fairground and everywhere, just locking people up. That is one of the bigger ones. And before then, we were down on, 10th Street and about 5th Avenue at the church. That day, that's the day that Bull Connor was down there telling them to put all them niggas in the, in the wagons, and this lady was over there, and she was a good friend of my mama, and people were standing around looking, and the police come over there and they dogged this lady out and just whooped her around because she fought back. She had to whoop the shoes off of her and was taking her to jail. And people standing around looking at this here, the way they were doing that lady. And it just made people mad.
No
people
one
just got
attempted
mad.
to do anything, but it was just upsetting.
It was upsetting. They moved on, we went back to mass meeting. From there, they started marching, and there's so many things, because people saw what was happening. They know that we knew that if what wasn't the thing done at that time would never be nothing done. For them to do her like that in front of thousands of people.
You knew this lady?
Yeah, I knew her.
Is she still living?
No, she's dead now. But it was something. There was so many of us out there looking until it just made us mad.
Do you remember her name?
I don't know that lady. I can't remember.
Yeah.
That's the same time when we had sort of people so mad that day. It was like a mini riot that night. They turned a fire truck over, and they burned up some things over on the south side that night. It was a broom factory. They burned it up. Then when the firemen come over there, it was just, people just got mad.
Just all havoc breaking loose.
It was just pure hell at that point.
You were first arrested, I believe, at Newberry's.
Yes.
Tell me what the circumstances of that arrest were.
Well, it was demonstrations all around. We were coming at them because they were trying to arrest us all, but we used the tactic. There were so many of us coming, and they were just keeping busy. So that's when they started marching to move the bus. By the time they take one load of people off, here come another crowd. We marched all kind of ways out of that church. That's the day that they put the dogs on that board and had the fire hoses down there, watering everybody down. It was hot.
Did the dogs ever attack you?
I wasn't attacked, but I wasn't going to run up on a dog. That was too much.
What about the water hoses?
Well, we went around it, but we didn't go directly into it. But it was so many things happening. I remember this. They turned the water hose on everybody, on this big fat lady. This great big lady, she turned her behind around. They put this fire, I don't know how she stood it, but she stopped that water from hitting a lot of people. She blocked the water. We laughed about it. But how she did that, they were watching people down the street with them hoses.
Well, did she purposely do that?
She purposely turned her behind around to let them hit it with the fire hose to keep them from, getting in the crowd of us and all us trying to march. They was trying to stop us from going. They wanted to stop us in our tracks. But like I said, once they got one group of us, there was another 20 groups over here, was 30 over here, was 40 over there. So we was just bombarding them, so to speak. And
tell me about the arrest at Newberry's.
They put us on they grabbed us all, they told us they come up with the policemen, with the little photographer and all, and tell us we all under arrest,
What were you doing?
Parading without a permit.
Okay, so you were...
That we needed a permit to parade.
Okay.
And we wasn't studying about no permits,
So you were actually outside?
I was outside. We didn't get to go in the store. It was already a bunch of us in the store. In fact, they started closing the doors. It was just one door, I think, on 2nd Avenue that you could get in Newberry. All the rest of the doors, they had locked them. And the store was just, people were sitting at the counter, there was nowhere to sit. They weren't getting waited on, but it was just, we were just all around the place, all over. And then the other store, it was Lovin', there was Pazit, and, just thousands of us, so to speak.
Were you taken away in a paddy wagon, or a car, or a bus?
I guess it was a school bus or a city bus, one of them.
And where did they take you?
Oh, city jail.
And how long did you remain there?
I stayed in there 8 days.
In the city jail?
In the city jail.
What was that experience like?
Rough, it's hot, uncomfortable, and the only thing they give us was Octagon soap to bathe with, and Octagon soap would break you out. So when I come out of there, I had these, from washing with Octagon soap, these bars and things on my arms and stuff. After you sit on that concrete and still so long, the bottom of your pants come out, and you're just about in rags when you come out because they won't let nobody bring you anything, and just get what they give you.
What was the atmosphere like in there among those of you who had been arrested?
Crazy. It was pandemonium at times, but there were people in there, some of the leaders were in there with us, were able to at times keep things calm.
When you say crazy, what does that mean?
Well, there were people had never been to jail. I had never been, and here we all locked up in there, regular piling us in like rats. It was hot, there was no air conditioning, and a whole bunch of people packed in a small place. It can get, over where if a fight break out, one fight break out, then everybody's involved because there's nowhere to go. So it was just...
So did that happen?
There were a few times, but most of the time the leaders were able to stop whatever was happening, but it was just... People came from all over Birmingham, and they all ended up in jail together. And a lot of them didn't know each other, even though we were out there in the movement together. But when you put people in a hostile situation like that, one side of town, the other side of town, or this or that, it was kind of rough there for a while.
Now, was your mother involved in that demonstration?
At that time, she was not involved. Later, she became involved.
Now, you went to jail, and there is some indication that...
Yes, she sat outside, because what happened is that they were getting us out of jail, and they called my name late at night, and everybody was sleeping. They didn't know where I was. The people who knew me didn't know where I was in there. When they come around calling, I didn't hear my name. So that meant I had to go back to the back of the line to get out of jail because they were bailing us out, night and day. But I ended up having to stay because they told me the next day they had called my name that night, and I didn't know it. I didn't hear it, where I was in the jail, but that's why I ended up staying much longer.
Was it true that your mother held
a
Yeah,
vigil
she stood outside. She went over.
for the entire 8 days?
Well, I know about 5 of them. Now, the first few, she was running around trying to see about them getting me out. You know, when y'all gonna get my boy out of here? And after that happened, because they had told they were going to get me that night, and that's when, after I didn't come out of there, that's when she went over somewhere across the street and borrowed her chair and sit out there until I come out of there.
And she just sat out there several days
Yes.
on end.
I think after that, that's when she got caught up in the movement, because she was out there and people were talking to her, because she was definitely against it in the beginning. But after that, it was a sort of like a turning point for her. You know, she saw what was happening.
What was her response to you once you got out?
She was glad I was out of there to start with, you know, and she wasn't mad at me. People were talking, you know, you're sitting outside the jail, and I guess she was, at that point, she was like we were. She got caught up in it. She saw the injustices of the whole thing, so from that point on, I had no problem with her, you know.
Did you continue to participate in the in the marches and demonstrations?
Yes, we did.
Were you ever arrested again?
No, I didn't intend to go back to jail in Birmingham no more. After that experience, that was enough.
So how did you avoid not being arrested again if you continued to demonstrate?
Well, you might, but when they go to arresting folks, you move out the way. They give you the choice, you know, either you break this up because you're parading without a permit, or you go into jail. So it's your choice. Yeah.
So you always decided differently. The first time you decided to
I decided, but after 8 days, I did not want to go back to jail in Birmingham no more. But that didn't stop my participation on none of the rest of us. That was, like, all my friends were all caught up in it. I remember, I think the March on Washington was in 64, if I'm not mistaken, 63.
In August 63.
We met at 6th Avenue Baptist Church, and they were signing people up, or asking for people to sign up for the March on Washington. But my mom had said to me that I couldn't go. But she was coming to the mass meeting because I was going. She was always looking for me, but I was always ducking her at that point. And they had us all sign up there one night, and they said, well, I knew she was there somewhere looking for me, so I couldn't sign up, but one of my friends signed my name up, you know. And my aunt, she was really caught up in it at that point, even though she was an older lady, you know. She kind of pushed me a little bit because we did some things together back during that time as far as, you know, working in the civil rights movement.
Did you attend the March on Washington?
We did go to the March on Washington. I think it was about 8 busloads of us that left Birmingham and went up there.
Did your
No,
mother?
my mother, she didn't go. All me and all my friends, we went though.
Did she approve of your going eventually?
No, she didn't want me to go there then.
Yeah. What was that like? What was that march on Washington?
It's something you never forget because some things I remember more. There was a lot of different people speaking, but I can remember Mahalia Jackson singing, and I can remember when Dr. King spoke, how quiet it got with that many thousands of people and sitting around just reflecting pool. It was hot. Had our feet in the water, you know, trying to cool your feet off. It was just, I guess it was just that time. It was the right time for all the things that did happen.
You were back in Birmingham in September of '63 when the 16th Street Baptist Church was bombed.
Right.
What do you remember about that?
It was on a Sunday morning. I was on the front porch where it had been some bombings before because they had bombed this church over on Center Street over in Smithfield, and we heard the bomb, and all of us, we took off in the direction of the bomb, and we got as far as 8th Avenue there by the Smithfield Project, and the National Guard were out there, and they asked us where were we going, and one of my friends, the National Guard, had a bayonet on his gun, and he was telling us to get back, and he swiped around with the bayonet, and one of my friends, he hit him on the neck with that blade. So we took our running in because more of those National Guard men were it was in the dark. But we knew what had happened, you know, but we couldn't get up there. And after that, they bombed the church. That was on a Sunday morning. I was on the front porch, and I heard the noise, but I didn't know what it was, you know, at that point. And I think somewhere, somebody come through saying they had bombed the church. Well, you know, we couldn't go down there because the police had the whole downtown area, you know, that day blocked off. But you could hear a bomb when it go off, and there were different places that they were doing this, but it seemed like the sound would just travel.
What was Birmingham like that Sunday? Do you remember?
It was kind of a cloudy day, overcast. You know, it was.
What were people doing as a result of that bombing? Do you remember anything that you all did that you attempted to go over?
We attempted to go over, but you couldn't go.
Yeah.
Because they had it blocked off. They didn't want people coming,
Right.
you know, that way. So there's nothing we could do at that point. But after then, that's when the mass meetings really took off. And they started having mass meetings all over town, you know, and people were coming from everywhere. After that, after they bombed that church, a lot of people saw things different because they know they wasn't going to get no better if, you know, wasn't anything done about the way the situation was at that time.
You graduated from high school in 1964.
Right.
What did you do after that?
Shortly after I finished school, I joined the Job Corps. It wasn't much of opportunity for going to college like now. You know, that was almost unthought of at the time. It was enough to get through high school.
Where did you go? Where was the job?
I went up to Indiana, some place called, Columbus, Indiana, somewhere up there.
And how long were you there?
Oh, I didn't stay because I wasn't ready for that at that point. I had to come out of there because it wasn't no better than where I was here. You know, the Job Corps just got started then, and it wasn't really structured for no learning thing anyway. And you got to sit up in a classroom with your books in your hand, the few they did give you. And it was hot, you know, and then you go hot buildings and away from home first time. It wasn't ideal at that time.
So you came back to Birmingham?
I came back to Birmingham.
And what did you do then?
The only job I could find at that point was washing dishes, bus boy. So
Where was that?
first job I ever had was over at the Parliament House, and I think I was a bus boy over there then. And that's probably why I did like I did, because I'd been in all these demonstrations. Here, this lady was enough busting these tables, and they want to add insult or insult. They get you in front of all these other white folks and go ask you to do all kind of crazy things.
Like what, for instance?
Well, she told me to get down on the floor and all these white folks looking and clean the baseboards and stuff. You know, get on your knees and do it. And I told her, you get out there and do them. At that point, I got left there. That was the first job I had, and I didn't even go back and get my paycheck.
So Parliament House still owe you that?
Yeah. It was just that I wasn't, you know, it just wasn't what I wanted to do at that point. One of my partners had gone up to Cleveland, Ohio. I went up there and I stayed over a while. I didn't like that. And I come back home. And April of '66, I went to California. And I stayed in California until from '66 up to '74.
You became a member of SCLC,
Right.
And you went to Dorchester
Center. It's over, what is it, south side of, Hilton Head, South Carolina,
Right.
Savannah, Georgia, several places. We went to there was a place in Savannah, Georgia we went to, and then over the bridge in South Carolina, somewhere, we went to another place over there. So
What were you doing?
it was all involved with the voting rights issue at that time, of voting rights education. They would give us some training in how to help people to pass their voting rights, the voting test that they had to take at that time.
Okay, this is after you finished high school?
Some of this was while I was in school, but it was during the summer when all this took, you know, it wasn't that I missed school to do it, because my mama definitely wasn't going to allow that, you know, but it was during the summer, and that these are doing breaks when these things were organized for us to have these workshops and what have you.
So you went to St. Augustine, Florida.
Right.
What did you do in St. Augustine?
We marched, oh gosh, what was that man, what was his name? It was a dentist who had invited everybody to come down, black dentist, and Dr. King, you know, and all of, we went down on buses. And people came. That's when I met, was later in September Clark and all of them from Mississippi. They were down there, and we marched. They had a slave mart down there. There was motels they didn't want people to stay in. We was marched down the motel, and they put some alligators in the swimming pool to keep us, because people going to be jumping in the pool. And once they found out we were going to do these type things, that's when they put the alligators in the pool to keep us from getting in them. Because them people were mad that we were that smart. St. Augustine's a small little town. It's the oldest city in America. And the thing was, if we break the back of segregation in St. Augustine, with it being the oldest city in America, then that gives us that we may break the whole thing. And we were marching. We marched the beaches down there. They didn't want to have black and white beaches. They didn't want us on the beaches. You couldn't go down there in the park downtown. You couldn't just go to none of the little stores they had.
Were you there then? Did you defy the law at that time?
Yes, we were defying the law.
And were you arrested?
Yes, we were arrested. First time I got arrested, we were, gosh, so long ago. First time we marched, where were we? We went to the beaches and they beat us up, but then we didn't get arrested out there.
Who beat you up? The police?
Good white
just
folks, rednecks there.
Yeah.
So yeah, they was out there and they sharp hands with baseball bats and axe handles. So they wanted to whip some niggas' head, and that's what they proceeded to do. But we had already been stressed to us the importance of nonviolent, not fighting back. And that helped a lot, because if we'd have acted the way they acted, we would have got nowhere, because then they said we were creating a riot. And the police would stand back and let them do so much to you, and after that they'd come and break it up. After they have killed you, something like that.
And arrest them?
No, arrest you. It wouldn't bother them. That's their buddies and their friends. They're not going to arrest them.
So you take a whipping and then you would be arrested. How long did you remain in jail in St. Augustine?
Yeah, maybe 3 or 4 days the first time. And the second time, I think I was in there overnight. Because they did bail us out.
Well, each time were you on the beach?
No, the first time we were just marching. We was going to like a little department store, like Cresses, and going to get ice cream sundae, what we were supposed to be going to get. Everybody had some money, make sure you had money in your pocket to go and ask for what you wanted. And they put us in jail just marching around the store. Then we started having night marches around the slave mart. We were marching around the slave mart, and all these white people over in the slave mart, throwing bricks and spitting on you and things like that. And it was just pure pandemonium, just craziness. The police would stand back and let them do so much to you, then they'll stop and grab you and throw you in a patrol wagon or bus or whatever to take you out to jail.
Now, you said you were marching around the slave mart.
Yes.
What do you mean slave mart?
Okay, in St. Augustine, it's right on the Atlantic. You used to bring the slaves over from Africa or wherever, and when they come in, it's maybe a couple of blocks up, this little park. They used to have the slaves up in this thing where the people come and look at them and buy them.
Was this a museum at the time?
It's a historic site there in St. Augustine. And we marched around the slave mart, protesting this segregation thing and the things that had happened. That's the way St. Augustine's an old city. So,
were you employed with SCLC at any time?
No, I was never employed. I just worked in the voting rights campaigns, but not as a staff. No.
You were never on the staff
No.
itself. Okay. After St. Augustine, then what did you do? Did you come back to Birmingham?
We came back to Birmingham, and we all were the different people who had gone down, organized in that area, telling people out there the need to vote. Because at that point, there was nobody voting. Maybe most of anybody, I guess, voted back then was school teachers or professional people. The average person, they never thought about voting because they know they couldn't go down there and sign up to vote. And that was one of the things that we learned in the workshop, how to help these people that could read and write, how to help them prepare for, taking this test, this literacy test, in order to be able to vote.
Do you remember when you applied to become a registered voter?
I wasn't old enough at that time to vote, so I was helping people who were old enough, but not that I was old enough at that time.
And there were you had friends that were the same age that were
Right.
helping as well.
Right.
So you guys were rather active then, although you were not able to participate, in effect, in
The voting itself, right? We weren't old enough. But I think a lot of the things we did encouraged the passage of this voting right. Led up to a lot of, because what it did is a lot of things we were doing. Once that Civil Rights Act came in, a lot of things we were doing we didn't have to do anymore.
Like what, for instance?
I mean, say like helping people to prepare for this voting thing, you know, to pass this test. That was null and void at that point once the Voting Rights Act was passed. Didn't have to do all this old long drawn out test.
Right.
And it was all unequal. You know, some places I guess it was that you had a few questions to answer, you go somewhere else, you may have to do a whole book. You know.
How would you say your experiences during those days impacted upon your life long term?
Well, the one thing it did, I probably never would have known that all this stuff if the movement hadn't come along when it did. Things would have probably continued as they had been going on before then. But with the movement coming along, it woke us up to the things that we were or should have been entitled to that we were not. Because we had no idea that we weren't supposed to drink out that black fountain or this. You considered it the way it was and that was it. But by being made aware that we were just as good or better than they, and the things that had happened to us and why they were happening and why they would continue to happen if we didn't get up off our behinds to do something about it, is one of the, I think, one of the most important things I got out of that. If you want something, you got to get up and get it.
If the movement was taking place right now, would you allow your children to be involved? Would you encourage them?
It would
to be
sure
involved?
help them, because the way things are now, these kids think that, you know, everything that's supposed to be given to you, that they don't have to work for it, that it just, that's some of the what it was back then. We didn't have. So what happens by us not having, then here comes a better day, then the parents basically have spoiled the kids. They've given them too much, trying to overcompensate for what they didn't have, and this in turn spoils the children. They think that you're supposed to just give it to them, you know, that they don't have to get out there and work for it. So it's a different set of values with the kids now than when we were growing up, because everything now is just basically handed to them. They ask for it and they get it. Back then we asked for it, we didn't get it. We didn't even ask for it because we know it was impossible. So that meant that you had to get out there, get up off your behind, and get out there and get what you want, you know, if something you wanted.
Is there anything that we have not covered that you would like to share with people today in relationship to the movement?
Well, compared to, there are a lot of people today who are in these positions and things, probably weren't even born then. They got the big head. You know, I got it and you don't. But they should stop to look back on how they got what they got, why they got what they got. There are a lot of people who have gone to their graves helping these people today who got these positions and things that they think that they just automatically got them, but they didn't. There was a lot of people who died for it. I remember back, we were marching in Selma, and the news came that they had killed those people, that white lady, Viola Uzo, and those two guys over there in Mississippi. And we were down there in Selma marching, and it did something to a lot of people to hear that. And then shortly after, they found them over there dead and buried over there on some kind of old grave and stuff. And you just hear about these different things that was happening to people, and it would just get you, just make your blood boil. So you tried to do whatever it said, whatever you had to do, you did. As far as going to jail, you got hit with a billy club or you got spit on, all of this. People, these kids today, if someone happened like they want to shoot them and kill them all up. But see, Dr. King stressed to us the importance of nonviolence. These kids today don't know nothing about that. You know, the nonviolent part of it. It's all about the violence now, so it's opposite from where we were.
A different day.
Different day. And that's one of the things I have to realize myself, that it's a different day. And it's a different set of values that these kids have now compared to what we had. Because couldn't expect much. We didn't expect much because there was nothing to expect, you know. And there wasn't that many TVs around. But one TV in the block, that was a lot. You know, everybody basically had a radio, but TV and all this stuff, the way it is now, and all the stuff these kids have now. We didn't have any of that, and we didn't know what it was. We knew people had things, but we didn't have.
Mr. Simpson, I want to thank you for taking time out of your schedule today.
All right,
You've
thank
really
you.
enlightened us on many issues. We certainly do appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Well,